The final criteria that we're going to talk about in terms of mixing up typefaces is the mood that they create. And as an example, I'm going to show you two versions of an opening spread for a layout about a 16-year-old girl who tried to sail around the world alone and very nearly died in a terrible storm. Don't worry, she was rescued. So we're going to look at these two versions of the layout and talk about how the type affects the mood that's set right from the very beginning. So in this particular example, that type has a very foreboding feeling. It's a little bit heavy, even though it's a very light, beautiful italic face. It's a little bit heavy, it's very large, and it's sitting right on the horizon as if it might sink. And while the image here is also a bit foreboding, the type is really contributing to that feeling of sort of impending disaster. And that's not really how the story turns out. So in a way, this mood is a little bit misleading. So here's the opener that actually ran with the story, and yes, it's a totally different, much happier and sunnier picture, but look at what the type is doing as well to contribute to that feeling of kind of optimism that we're seeing here. The italic face has not gone away, it's still used for that word storm, but the words weathering and the have become this very thin, very elegant sans serif face. They're rendered in a kind of blue sky color, and they contribute to a certain buoyancy and kind of feeling of uplift that makes you feel that perhaps things did turn out all right. So it's kind of interesting to see how a small change in type can really alter how something feels. And that's the kind of tricky thing about mood, is that there really aren't hard and fast rules. It's kind of like aesthetics. Although aesthetics are something that you see, mood is only something that you feel, and that kind of contributes to how you approach the rest of your design. So for a try this, go back to that pair of typefaces that you chose and mix in a third one, this time not to change the aesthetics, but to change the mood. See if you can use that typeface to convey a feeling of optimism, or of doom if you want. Make it more scholarly, make it happier, make it funnier. See what that third typeface can do, how it sort of changes the party without completely putting you into a different landscape. In other words, let's say you're imagining a type palette for a company that makes machine parts. Well, you might not want to make that more dreamy, but you might want to make it more fun. Can a typeface help you do that? The only way to learn is to try it. Do remember that you need to assign each face a specific role in your hierarchy to keep some consistency, so that even though the mood is changing, the role and the functionality of your type is not. So before we wrap things up, let's go over a quick list of do's and don'ts, and of course we'll start with the do's. Keep your typographic scheme flexible and open to improvement, by which I mean something may be designed and work beautifully in the prototype, but in practice it may be lacking in some area. It may not be legible enough at the size that you thought you wanted to run it. It may not be able to fit enough copy because it sets too wide. Like, these are things that you really can't learn until you're into it. Maybe you liked your caption font at first, and then the more you worked with it, the more it became irritating to you. So you're going to have to change that. So type is really a living, breathing thing. As you work with it, you can always evolve it subtly to make it better and better. And keep the big picture in mind. We all have our favorite typefaces, and it's tempting to try to apply them to every project, but there is no one-size-fits-all. Despite what Massimo Vignelli says and his 10 typefaces, that's a hard thing to pull off. If your typeface is just not working for the project that you have at hand, save it and use it for something where it's more well-suited. And sometimes, if you've got the luxury of the time to really experiment and play around, do something with your type that you think will not work. Just say, this is never going to work, and then just do it, because you would be surprised. Maybe that first attempt is just a disaster, but it leads you in a direction to try some other fonts that, while you might not have thought of pairing them with each other, somehow they work very well. It's like seating completely different people next to each other at a dinner party. Sometimes they get along famously. And so now let's wrap it up with the don'ts. And of course, don't keep throwing extra typefaces into the mix. I hope we've convinced you over the course of this tutorial that that really isn't the way to go, that you can achieve all the variety and texture and functionality with just a few typefaces. Always experiment with your basic set, adding weights and sizes, maybe changing colors, leading, tracking, all of that before deciding whether or not you really need to add another typeface. Don't rush to use whatever type happens to be very trendy at the moment just because it will make your design look quote-unquote new. It will also make it look quote-unquote old very quickly if that type becomes very associated in people's minds with a specific point in time. I'm not sure that's the look you're going for. Maybe you want to achieve something that's a little bit more your own and less rushing to kind of jump on that bandwagon of, oh my God, there's this new font, we all must use it. I think that happened a little bit with some fonts like Gotham, where they were everywhere for a while, and that's a great font, but now I think people are moving away from it a little bit because it was so ubiquitous. And don't forget that changing one typeface will change the mood of your design in a flash. Sometimes that can be a good thing and sometimes not. So even a simple substitution of, one very basic sans serif font like Helvetica for another one like News Gothic can suddenly alter the entire feeling of what you're doing. So make sure that's your intention before you actually do it. So this concludes combining typefaces within a layout, and I hope you've seen over the course of this tutorial that with just a few basic rules in mind, you can go ahead and create fantastic layouts simply by combining 2 or 3 typefaces and mixing up their different families within your layout. You don't need to throw everything and the kitchen sink onto a document, and you shouldn't. In a way, it's like making a cocktail. Think about all the different drinks that start with vodka and end up in very different places. By mixing in other ingredients carefully, you can achieve quite a range of moods and styles and feelings within your layouts and achieve your own typographic style, which is something that most people really should think about in that specific term, because it's one of the things that will really distinguish you as a designer. So thanks so much for listening to this tutorial. I'm Angela Riechers for Media Bistro On Demand, and for more great content and the best media job listings, visit MediaBistro.com.